Baker Mayfield has had a rough year. After tearing the labrum in his non-throwing shoulder in week 2, he's battled injuries and inconsistent play for the better part of 11 weeks with no end in sight. His performance on the field has also been increasingly worrying. These two facts are obviously related, but how much of his play is attributable to injury is a subject to intense debate among Browns fans. Today we plan to address that debate by completely ignoring it. Mostly. Instead, let's look at the options available to the Browns with a critical eye. We don't know the Browns' thought process towards their QB and his future, and it's increasingly likely he'll be playing on a one-year deal next season. So let's take a look at 3 potential routes for the Browns to shore up the QB position this offseason. These options are, from most likely to least likely, sign or trade for a high upside backup, draft a high upside backup in later rounds, or make a big trade. Let's start with the quickest one, which is drafting a backup. The reason it's quick is we have absolutely no idea how the Browns' current front office values quarterbacks. Andrew Berry was here in 2018 when they drafted Baker Mayfield, but that was pretty firmly a John Dorsey pick. While this Browns front office has given us plenty of indication of what type of player they like at other positions, quarterback is very much a different story. While I can't tell you what quarterbacks the Browns are interested in, I can tell you that as many as 7 quarterbacks are getting first-round hype at the moment, including Mississippi's Matt Corral, Pittsburgh's Kenny Pickett, Liberty's Malik Willis, Cincinnati's Desmond Ridder, Nevada's Carson Strong, North Carolina's Sam Howell, and most recently Wake Forest's Sam Hartman. There's plenty of other people who could jump into that conversation over the next few months, but the point is that there aren't going to be 7 QBs selected in the first round. If one of the QBs the Browns have a first round grade on happens to drop to the mid-second, you have to think the wheels start turning in Andrew Berry's head. There are also options that would be worth talking about in the later part of the draft, such as Boston College's Phil Jurkovec and Western College's Bailey Zappi. But again, we just generally don't know how the team will value QBs. Speculation is fun leading up to the draft, and undoubtedly we'll be doing plenty of it here on the OBR, but it's tough to really break down which options the Browns would be more likely to pursue in the draft without knowing more. Next, let's talk about the most likely of these options, which is bringing in a high upside backup. Case Keenum can be released for very little dead cap after the season, and it would save over $6 million. So it seems likely that a new backup quarterback is on the way, regardless of any other quarterback decisions. There are 3 options they could go with here in terms of looking at trades and free agency for a backup. The first is to sign or trade for a low-cost, high-upside backup. The Browns have shown great interest in former high draft picks at other positions in free agency, so it stands to reason they'll look for similar players if trying to replace their backup QB, especially given the wealth of options available. The ones everyone will be going after are 2 former number 2 overall picks, Mitch Trubisky and Marcus Mariota. Especially considering Matt Nagy's struggles this year, plenty of people will look at Trubisky as a low-risk reclamation project. Jameis Winston will be a free agent as well, and it's possible he doesn't find a starting job anywhere. On the trade front, there's a few options that will likely be available for basically nothing, specifically Gardner Minshew of the Eagles and Sam Darnold of the Panthers. The latter has a big cap hit that the Panthers would obviously need to eat most of if he's going to be moved, but assuming that's a hurdle that can be cleared, he fits the mold. The next option is to trade for a more expensive backup with upside, and this group effectively is just former top picks that teams may be wanting to move on from. This group includes Jalen Hurts, Drew Lock, and Daniel Jones. Hurts and Jones may be somewhat costly to acquire, similar to Darnold's trade last year, which cost a second-round pick. So this one is more likely if the Browns don't have faith that Mayfield can turn it around in 2022. Another name to watch is Tua Tagovailoa, who has played pretty well the past few weeks and may earn himself some more time in Miami. The last group is a veteran backup specifically to push Mayfield. This would essentially just be a more cost-effective version of Keenum. Players that could potentially be looking at backup roles this season are Teddy Bridgewater, Tyrod Taylor, and Jacoby Brissett, who are all poised to hit free agency. None of these options I just mentioned really project as things that will excite the fan base or put butts in the seats. So to do that, let's look at the third avenue that the Browns could take, and by far the least likely, making a big trade. Since this is the one that's almost certainly not going to happen, this is obviously the one I spent the most time on. There's 3 names we're going to talk about here: Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Matt Ryan. There will potentially be others available like Jimmy Garoppolo, but those are close to lateral moves and aren't really worth talking about. We'll talk about each of the 3 individually, but I would like to establish the market first. I took a look at the QB situations of every team in the NFL and broke them down into 5 categories based on how likely they are to pursue a QB this offseason. The biggest group is the ones not looking for a quarterback at all. consisting of teams that have a franchise QB or just drafted a QB last year. The next group is probably not looking for a QB. This is mostly teams with veteran QBs that likely won't be moving on yet, as well as the Packers. For the purposes of this experiment, I'm assuming the Packers will be trading Aaron Rodgers, and this rating is based on their desire to ride with Jordan Love. There's two I have no real idea about. Wentz is playing better, but he could revert to hyper crap at any moment. And Cousins is an analytics darling, but Minnesota will probably be looking for a new coach considering this season has probably taken 10 years off Mike Zimmer's life. There's three I have listed as probably looking for a new QB, and this group is basically just the three teams who I expect to move on from their young QB this offseason. Again, Tagovailoa is the one on this list who is most likely to play his way into another year, but I think there was a lot of truth to their pursuit of Deshaun Watson. Then, finally, the list of teams that definitively will be looking for a new QB. These are the teams that will be the first to call Seattle and Green Bay when the season is over. Again, for the purposes of this experiment, I have Atlanta and Seattle trading their QBs, and as such, they would need another. So here's our list. Each QB has some say in where they'll go for different reasons. So let's remove teams that are very clearly in rebuilding mode that a veteran QB won't want any part of. So we finish with 10 teams, assuming we include the Browns, vying for 3 veteran quarterbacks. This is actually the reason I broke all of this down, because I think it's actually quite surprising how few teams represent actual fits. Now let's look at each of the QBs individually. Aaron Rodgers has an opt-out after next year, so has leverage over the team he's going to since he could refuse to sign an extension. Considering the fact that he's still playing near an MVP level, he will likely command multiple first-round picks. For Cleveland to be a realistic destination, however, they'll need to make investments into the wide receiver room as well, likely through free agency. This is one to watch, but the Browns may just not have the resources to bring in both Aaron Rodgers and stock the wide receiver room with talent. Russell Wilson is an interesting one considering the rumors that he wanted to go to Chicago last offseason. Cleveland isn't quite Chicago in terms of city reputation, but Russ is willing to play in cold weather cities. Unlike the Packers, the Seahawks would be looking for a replacement QB as well, and so including Baker Mayfield in a potential package may help push the Browns over the edge in a mega deal for Russ. He has a partial no trade clause, however, and would need to be convinced into waiving that for the Browns. Matt Ryan has an absolute nightmare of a contract, and as such is probably the least predictable option on this list. Atlanta will have to balance how much money they want to eat in a rebuilding year and how much they'll demand from other teams. This may end up being something like a baseball trade, where Atlanta may take less compensation for him in exchange for the trading team taking on more of his contract. At the same time, Ryan is a former MVP, and I think a lot of teams will view him in the vein of Matt Stafford, considering the surrounding talent is almost unfathomably bad, especially since Calvin Ridley went out. One final note on any trade, I think a lot of people will point out that Baker Mayfield's contract is fully guaranteed, and that would prevent the Browns from making a move due to cap reasons. But they could easily find a trading partner for Mayfield. Considering Sam Darnold netted a second-round pick after 3 terrible years, someone will be interested in taking on Mayfield's contract, and they'll almost certainly offer picks to do so. And that alone kind of says it all. All this QB talk that will inevitably cloud this season is all about Baker Mayfield's value, because he still does have value, and no one can dispute that. It's obvious and undeniable that his performance has been affected by injuries. It's up to the Browns to determine what value he provides moving forward, and if they even need to bother looking at quarterback options. Here's hoping Baker can turn it around and end this conversation. EOBR, also check us out on Twitch every evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.